Good morning to everyone. As Stuart said, welcome to CSP's Tips and Tricks webinar series, this one being on Microsoft Excel. Again, my name is Stephen Riddick, and I am the VP of Sales and Marketing here at CSP, and I will be leading today's session. Instead of death by PowerPoint, we're going to spend the majority of our time today in Excel. However, before we dive into the demo, I would like to go over just a few logistics and important notes. So first and foremost, I would be remiss if I did not start by saying a big thank you. I know everyone is extremely busy, so I really appreciate you taking a few short minutes out of your day to spend some time with us. I've spent a lot of time preparing the session to try to make it as valuable and worthwhile as possible, so that is my goal and objective to you. Also, in regard to the time, your time is valuable. We obviously want to respect that. I believe the invite said an hour, but actually we polled everyone after our first webinar that we did on this on Microsoft Outlook last month, and the large majority said they would prefer a 30-minute session, so this will be 30 minutes. Also, I got a lot of great feedback after the last session in regard to time. I tried to cram too much information into such a short amount of time, so things became a little bit muddy. Thus, I have tried very hard to shorten my presentation, give time for repetition to make sure that I am being very clear in some of the points that we'd like to make. Next, as Stuart mentioned, you are muted. We do apologize, but we had, I think, over 80 attendees today. So just to make the webinar run smoothly, we did mute everybody upon entry. As Stuart mentioned, any questions, please type them in via the Zoom interface. And finally, number 4, your feedback is welcome and celebrated. We got some great input after our first session, and hopefully you'll see an enhanced webinar today based upon that, but keep it coming. There is going to be a poll again at the end. We're always trying to improve. I do not take things personally and want to just do the best that we can. So please provide your feedback. So as I said, I did look at the registration this morning, and we did have some new faces out there. So as such, I want to take just a very brief moment to introduce both our firm and myself. CSP is a 22-year-old managed IT services and solutions firm based here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We pride ourselves on being an end-to-end technology provider. So we focus on anything from IT support to cloud services to technology solutions and everything in between. I'll say right now, security has obviously been a huge hot button issue for a lot of people. So any questions in that or anything else, feel free to reach out. And again, my name is Stephen Riddick. I'm running our sales and marketing team. I've been with CSP for about 5 years, but I did start my career with Cisco Systems. That's where I learned the IT world. But as it relates to Excel, I was an economics major undergrad and went back for an MBA. So I've spent plenty of time crunching numbers in spreadsheets. I will say I have some friends in investment banking who can probably run circles around me when it comes to Excel, but at the same time, I do think I have a great foundation of how to use Excel, and look forward to sharing some of those tips that I have today. One really brief user note, I am using Excel 2016. There haven't been any major changes in the different revisions. There's some updates and things like that, but at least in how things look, most of the things are about the same, but if something looks slightly different, that is why. And finally, one brief disclaimer before we do dive in. I really want everyone here today to learn something new. But again, with over 80 people, I guarantee everyone is starting from a different level. There are going to be some beginners, some experts. So I have tried to create some demos that will point out a wide range of tricks and tips depending on where you fall on that spectrum. However, apologies if I do miss the mark, but I just ask for some patience, and I think that you will find something that will be valuable and good for you. And I guess last note, this isn't a demo on how Excel works. I mean, that would take an entire day. So I just picked 12 tips and tricks that I find very helpful and hope to be able to share with you. So with that, let's dive on in. I'm going to go straight into Excel. So as stated, I've actually just sort of created a couple demos to guide our conversation today. So this first sheet is a sheet that I created, just a fictitious company on creating and selling bobbleheads to Major League Baseball teams. So running a sales department, and yeah, it's a very simple spreadsheet. As you can see, I have some price and cost figures right here at the very beginning. I have my different accounts. units sold, and we are going to walk through some basic calculations. But again, even though the calculations are basic, don't worry, I do think you'll find some pretty cool things that to play with the data. So my very first tip is organization. I took, when I was getting my MBA, took a class on decision models that was all about Excel and very deep. And my professor's very first day, very first comment started with organization. And even though I've been using Excel for a long time and viewed myself as pretty well versed, I thought this was a great starting point. So I want to start with that today. And the biggest starting point when we talk about organization is keeping any values separate and on their own, in their own cell. And what I really mean by that is not ever having values in your formulas. This is a very, very simple spreadsheet. But once you start getting more complex, if we were to ultimately calculate the revenue, you could easily calculate the revenue by just taking your price, 9.99, multiplying it by the units sold, and get that revenue number. However, I would argue that anytime you're trying to troubleshoot or make changes to that, having to come back and look at the actual formula and make changes within the formula is much more complex, as opposed to having formulas that just reference cells and making a change to that cell. So we'll get there in a minute, but if I wanted to change my sales price of $10.99, I change it once here and it propagates out to the entire document. And so again, I know in this example, that's very, very simple, but I would just urge you to think about that really with everything you do, and wherever possible, do not have any actual values in your formulas because it can become a troubleshooting nightmare for you. And then as you can see, this is just a small thing that I do. I actually even highlight any of my data that are values that could be changing in a separate color, so that I know if I want to be changing my outputs, ultimately, these are the things that I'll need to be changing to get different outputs throughout. So I hope that makes sense and is an easy starting point. I know it's extremely intuitive, but I would urge all of you to consider that as you do start building spreadsheets and more in-depth spreadsheets. So organization, and I'll say, instead of no, I'll say limit values in formulas. Instead, try to link the cells that have the value in the cell. Much simpler troubleshooting. Okay, the next thing, and as I said, I'm going to move from very, very basic to much more complex ideas. So one just very basic one, and actually I'm sorry I'd already changed this from last time clearing out my data, but moving column widths. This is just an extremely easy one, but obviously you can move column width at the top. You can go into the column width, right click. I'm sorry, that was one right click when I selected the column. Go into the column and type how wide you want the column to be. Or the one thing that is very simple is double clicking. And double clicking will automatically move your column width out to the furthest value within that column. So here it was just based on the gross profit. If I had a normal column width over here, I typed everything in and I needed to figure out where to move that, double click once, and it will take it out, in this case, past 2016. So that may seem very, very simple here, but if you have a column with lots and lots of cells going way on down, just an extremely easy way to organize your data from column width. So number 2, column width. Double click to extend to furthest point. Okay, next, I think we're going to start moving into a few more complex or if not complex, hopefully helpful things that can, that can make your life in Excel even easier. One, let's go back to the formulas, and we're going to talk about how to anchor values. So, and this is really going to be a building block to where we're going to spend the rest of our time on this worksheet. But let's start by building a formula to calculate out my mass. So as I said, we don't want to simply enter in the 89,382 times my price to get that formula. Again, that is bad Exceling. So instead, we can enter a formula by saying equals my price times units sold. and that obviously gets to where I need to be. Boom, I have my revenue. But before I do anything else, let's not forget to anchor. And what we really mean by there is the difference between an absolute value or a relative value. So in a moment, we're going to get to how to quickly and easily calculate multiple formulas. And one thing that we're going to do is just be able to drag down. And what we were trying to do is saying, okay, I want my price times units sold for each in each cell. But unfortunately, that obviously did not work. You can see that I have a 0, I have a value, I have some weird numbers. And if we were to really go look at the formula here, you will see that the reasoning is, yes, it took my formula or my unit sold here, but it moved down to the price per unit. If I went to the next one, you would say it's taking that one, and then it's also moving down. So it's taking the relative formula. So what we want to do is, take the absolute instead. So I'm going to clear out those contents, and I'm going to no fill, no border there. And now let's take our price, but instead of that, we want to anchor that. So there's two ways that we can do that. One, extremely simple. As soon as you click on the cell that you want to use, hit function F4, and that will anchor it times the unit sold. And you can see in that anchor is the dollar signs that means that anchors it. So that will make this cell B3 consistent. No matter what I do in these other values, that one is going to stay consistent. So you can hit the function F4, or you can go the old-fashioned way, just type in the dollar signs yourself, and that has my value, and we are ready to go. So anchoring, we're going to go F4 to anchor that value. All right, so next we are going to, once I have my formulas correct, how do I populate all the cells? As I'm sure most of you know, and as I just did, I mean, you can easily drag, and you can drag by using the bottom right of the formula there, drag it down as far as you need it, and it will automatically calculate those formulas out as you go. So as you can see here, now again, we're anchored, so we're still using B3, and now we're using B8 as well. And the next one, I'm sorry, I anchored the wrong value there, but we will come back to that. I anchored B4, not B3, I apologize. But you can see that stays the same, and now B9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really easy here. I have only a small amount of data. I can drag that down. I'll say in my role working with our sales, we have hundreds of customers, and just recently doing some analysis of all those customers and trying to run some numbers. And you're talking about hundreds of lines in a spreadsheet. So I will say for anything like me to try to drag this all the way down, get it to the right spot, go up, it's always challenging to do. So I find that to be extremely a tedious process, an annoying process. So a much easier way is to simply double click on the bottom right-hand portion, and you will automatically, Excel will automatically populate out those values through the end of the data that you have. So I'm going to undo that really quick. Actually, let's just start over. I want to get it right for when we finish this out. So to do it one more time, I'm going to build our revenue by saying equals sales price, hit F4 to anchor that, times units sold, and hit enter, and then double click on my data, and it'll automatically populate that out. So we are going to say, I guess, copy data or copy the formulas, double click on bottom right corner. Okay. So once we have that, here are just two that I think are very awesome navigational shortcuts. And again, I'm using a very small data set right here to try to show this point, but I think it's very helpful when you're dealing with larger data. And that is, how do you navigate through? Again, if you have hundreds of lines, how do you get to the bottom? If you're anything like me, you have spent a lot of time trying to scroll down and finding where the end of your data is. And if you're talking about hundreds or thousands of lines of data, that in and of itself could be extremely challenging. So Control, and then if you look at your arrow keys, most of the time on the bottom right of your keyboard, you hit Control and arrow down right at once, it will take you to the bottom. Control and arrow up right back up to the top of your data set. Again, here I'm only dealing with a handful of items, so it's very easy to just find what I need. But I think with larger data sets, very important and easy thing to find. And another thing to do is if you have your data highlighted, which may be if you notice after we ran this number, all my data was highlighted. At that point, Control period. Right now on my keyboard, I'm just hitting Control period, and you can see that I'm jumping back and forth between the bottom and the top of my data set. So great way to easily navigate through your data without using the scroll bar up and down through potentially hundreds or thousands of rows of data. So we'll just call that navigation shortcut. Control plus up arrow, down arrow, or Control plus period. Okay, so I have some data here, and as I'm sure a lot of you know, how do you then sum it up? And it is simple, but there are a couple of ways to do it. So I want to just make sure that everybody's clear on the different ways. I would say this is probably much more of an intermediate step. So if I wanted to get a total of all my units sold, multiple ways to do that. One, you can hit equals and just go through and create, just sum them all. I'm going to take a cell plus the next cell plus the next cell plus the next cell, and add these up. That is obviously a long and tedious process, especially if you have a lot of data, but it is one way to get the information that you need. Second way, as I'm sure some of you are aware, you can use the equal sum feature within Excel. Equals, just type in sum, it'll give you parentheses, drag over the data that you want to sum, hit enter, and it'll calculate that out. Finally, though, probably one of the easiest ways that some people are scared of or I found aren't really aware of is if you look at the top right up here, the auto sum feature. So as you can see, Excel says it will automatically add it up, your total of the cells. So here, if I just put my mouse in the cell underneath this data, it will automatically sum it up for me, hit enter, and I have that data. So summation, I'll say equals sum or auto sum in the navigation window, navigation pane, navigation window. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. Again, it's some simple data and simple things that we're doing, but I think it does give a good example of showing how to easily clean up data. So just to go over a few of these things again, we'll build out the rest of the spreadsheet. So from a costing perspective, extremely easy to say my cost is going to be cost per unit. Let's make sure we anchor that number, and then we will multiply it by units sold. I then double click bottom right, it calculates that out. I then take my gross profit is obviously my revenue minus my cost. I put that out. You can see the number signs mean I don't have enough room to show it all, so I'm going to double click on the line to show the column width. That'll extend it out. And the last thing that we didn't really speak of, but I can move this over as well, and it will automatically take those formulas and move them out to everyone. So now, as you can see, in an extremely fast way, I've built, this is a basic, but there's a lot of data here, and I've built that out extremely fast. So hopefully that was some good examples of some good things that you can do. All right, so let's move to our next example. And don't worry, only 2 examples here, six tips per each. And again, hopefully there are a few things that we can do to show how to become more proficient in Excel. So for this, we're going to look at what I term sales growth sheet. And as you can see, just came up with a few different accounts that I was pretending that we were selling to or selling services to, depending on your political leaning. Have some for both sides of the aisle there. But, you know, for this one, we're going to focus a little bit more on speed, on how to get things to look good, and also how to troubleshoot. So let's start, again, extremely simple. As you can see here, I have a few things that you can't see all of my data. So this is a very simple task, but you can actually, we're going to select these and wrap text. And as you can see, wrap text, extra long text, and a multiple lines, so you can see all of it. So, whoops, sorry about that. So select and hit wrap text, and all of a sudden that data that we couldn't see, we can now see. A very, very easy one. I'm actually just gonna, we'll leave that there. Attention so it can be seen. So one, wrap text, leverage navigation pane. Okay. Next, this is one that I really, really love, and I hope you will find as well. But there are a lot of times when we're doing mailings to customers, or even just within our portals where customers have things to see, that we want their information to look good. And sometimes, candidly, people don't type it in using the most professional way. Maybe it's in all caps. Maybe they just copy and paste. There's some strange space marks. Some is in caps, some's not, whatever it may be. But I have all of these accounts. And again, imagine you have 100 different accounts and you want to try to make sure that these are labeled properly. It can be a very long time and a big headache to go through and type each one in as you would like to see when you're sending out, say, a mailing and doing a mail merge. So let's clean this up. And I think you'll find that it is extremely easy. We only have 4 rows here, but again, if you had a lot, this would be a much easier path. So I'm going to start by entering an additional column here. So insert column, and we're going to make this our account. And there's some great shortcuts that Excel has. First, let's just go to the proper. And proper, as you can see, converts text strings to a proper case. So I'm going to just go proper that, hit enter, and all of a sudden Trump properties is Trump properties. I can obviously drag that down, and for all of these, now my case is correct. But I still have the spacing issue. So what else can we do? We can also, there is another one for trim. Now we need to put in another set of parentheses, but equals trim. And that is automatically going to take away any spaces at the beginning of my data. So now I have that new formula. I'm going to double click, take it down, and you can see just like that, I have my ugly data and now in pretty data that if I want to do a mail merge, send it out on envelopes, I could do that. Again, having multiple, a lot of contacts, this would make it much easier. So we're just going to say cleanup, and those two were equals proper and equals trim. 2 great shortcuts within Excel. But the next thing, these are formulas now. So if you notice, while it looks pretty there, again, I'm actually have a formula. So how do I get this back? If I wanted to just delete, say, row A, to just delete that bad data at this point, I lose. These are all referencing something that no longer exists. So we can't do that. So how do we get the data back? I mean, one thing we could do, we could hide column A, right click, hide. But you know, then I lose a lot of other data, so I probably don't want to hide my data. Instead, I would recommend copying and pasting values and not the formulas. So there are 2 ways to do this. You know, one, I think the way that probably a lot of people are familiar with, I can copy And then if I wanted to, I could paste special, paste the value, not pasting the formula. And I'll show you in a second what that looks like, but paste value. But another way that I don't think quite as many people know about is, let me get rid of that, selecting the data, getting anywhere on the outside, holding down the right-click mouse button and dragging it over. And all of a sudden there, it pops out that I can copy here as values only. So at this point now, my value is Trump property spelled correctly. Whereas here, it is actually referencing the formula. So at this point now, if I want to delete column B that I created for this, I'm back to having the data in my proper form. So we are going to say, let's see, copy values. And then to do that, or to move values, select, hold down, or right click and hold mouse, move, and then copy values. All right. So to wrap things up, let's look at this box at the bottom, and these are just some easy tricks in case you're using Excel. In the previous example, we talked about how to quickly copy formulas, but what about text? So here I want to do some monthly sales projections. There's so many things that Excel is just so easy and so cool. All I need to do is type in January, and I can double click, and it's automatically going to populate out the entire calendar for me. Extremely fast way to do it. And it does that because it knows that with months, you probably want to continue in months. Let's say my retention, am I retaining these new clients? If I hit TBD there and do the same thing and double click, Excel is smart enough, it will automatically just keep TBD the same, but move that throughout my entire data set. So we are going to enter text, or and then double click to quickly permeate through data set. Okay, one other thing, number of new clients. Let's say I'm just adding a handful of clients each month, and this is a small data set, so again, it would be fairly easy, but one other way to do it besides just going in and entering 4, 3, 3, 5, or 2, 4, whatever that data is, I can easily select which cells I want to enter a certain date in, or a piece of data in. So this is identical information into non-adjacent cells. So I'm saying, you know what, I know in January, in April, in July, August, and November, I added 4 new clients. So I'm going to hit 4, and now I'm going to hit Control Enter. And it'll automatically populate that number 4 into all those cells. Let's say in February, we'll do it again. February, March, June, and October, I added 5 new. Select them, hit 5, Control Enter. It'll automatically populate those non-adjacent cells with the same. And as one final reminder, May, I hit Control to select this for July, still holding down Control, select December. Let's say we only got 3 new clients in those months, hit 3, Control Enter at the same time, and that populates out. So identical info in non-adjacent. That is select cells, enter value, and then Control plus Enter will put those values in. Okay, so last one, let's wrap up with just, I think, in a very, very easy one, but one that I think is very cool, and that is if you want to date your work. So there are 2 different things that you can do there. One, I mean, you could obviously just type in the date, but I want to show an example here that I think will make a little bit of sense. But another, Excel has a command of equals today, and it will automatically give me that date. But to me, the really cool one is sometimes you want to see not the date. That date, no matter when, if I save this, open it a week from now, it'll still be 5/24. The difference is equal now will always be the current date. So let's say you're actually using that for a formula to say number of days left in our quarter, for example. You know that the quarter ends July 31. Then you could say July 31 minus now. And whenever you open this Excel, it will come up with today's date, or the date that you are opening it at, minus, say, the date of the end of the quarter, and you will have that number, say, we're 15 days out from the end of the quarter, whatever it may be. So current date equals now. Okay, so that is it. 12 new tips and tricks. I hope at least a few of these were new or helpful for you. Again, I know different people are at different levels, so maybe not all. I did run through this. I thought I had it right at 30 minutes, and I guess with some of the intros, I ran just a couple minutes over. But with that, to briefly, I think repetition is huge, so let's go over them again. Organization, limit values in the formulas. That one is huge. 2, columns. Double-click on the columns to extend to the furthest point. To anchor a value, enter F4. To copy, double-click on the bottom right, and it'll copy down for your entire data set. Control up or control down or control period will rotate you through top and bottom of data sets. And the summation, don't forget about the auto sum key. And then next, the wrap text button if you would like to get data lined up in vertical form. To clean up the data, as we did over here, equal proper and equal trim are two great shortcuts in Excel. To copy values, select the entire section, get on the edge, on the border, right-click, move, and then you can say copy here as values only or whatever you want to do with it. To enter text, you can type in January and either drag it down or double-click. Identical info and non-adjacent cells, select the cells, enter the value, hit Control Enter, and then the shortcut for the current date equals now. So I hope that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for attending. We greatly appreciate your participation. As I stated, we would love your feedback. Please take a few seconds to fill out the survey. So thank you for attending. My contact information is on this final slide. Feel free. I will admit, email is normally the best way to reach me out and about a lot. So sriddick@cspinc.com for any follow-up questions.